of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking Time for Hemp. I am your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp all around the world on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Roku TV. Good golly, Miss Molly, we are everywhere. And if you've got a smartphone or a tablet that you take with you a lot, we've even got apps you can place into your smart devices and take us with you as you run around the world sharing your bud with your friends. So as you share your bud with your friends, you can also let them know about Time for Hemp. Also, if you go to timeforhemp.com, that's with the digit 4, number 4, timeforhemp.com, and click on the navigational button that says grow, you will learn to. As a matter of fact, we are growing cannabis live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, around the clock. It's a 2-year project that we're undertaking, and every 17 weeks or so, we're going to be setting up new gardens and showing you how to put together places in your home, backyard, or neighbor's farm on how to make the best out of your cannabis plant. Well, I am done promoting me and the network. It seems too much self-serving, especially when we have such great guests and a great joint host on the illustrious program. This is Small Town Fridays, and we like to roll into a small town and find a hardworking activist, put a spotlight on them. And often when I do, I travel with my good friend Michael Krawitz. Morning, Michael.
Good morning, Casper. It's good to be here.
And how are you doing? It's been a while. What's going on with Veterans for Marijuana?
Oh, Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access is in the middle of the thick of it. We've got a very ambitious program that we're working on at the national level. We've got a couple of bills in Congress, and we've got efforts underway in several different states. And we're in a good position to view the emergence of a whole new kind of activist world, a whole new activist genre with the veterans that have come up with Weed for Warriors and Grow for Vets and Veterans for Compassion and et cetera, et cetera. There's about 5 new organizations and about 5 emerging organizations. So this is really a great time to be involved in this kind of genre of veterans medical marijuana activism, and we're very proud to have the position that we have of sort of a guiding organization, and the work that we've done and we continue to do with the VA internally is paying off, and we're looking at negotiations now for the next iteration, the next version of the VA medical marijuana policy, which should be groundbreaking. So that's enough self-serving stuff on my side too. You know, today we have a really important and great guest with us. Over time, Casper, you and I have taken on the challenge of bringing our listeners into this world of international activism, and it's been a lot to cover. If our listeners want to go back into the archives and do a little reviewing, we have about 15 really great interviews that cover every aspect of cannabis and the international treaties on drug policy, international single convention on drugs, and what all this means. And we're going to be coming into a big drug summit here in just a few months away in 2016, April, which seems so far away when I first started saying it. And now it seems like tomorrow as I say it. And in this process, we have some allies that are working with us. Our guest today, Donald McPherson, is one of them. He has a history going back into Vancouver, and the work that they did was both structural and important, and somewhat of took somewhat of a mentor position to us in the United States and how we were looking at drug policy, the work that they did back in 2001 on the 4 pillars approach. And I hope, Donald, you can talk a little bit about that and a little bit about your work with the government before you came to work with the NGO work that we're doing now. I know I'm giving you a big task there to catch up, but I think it's really important for our listeners to know just how important this work was, and from my perspective, how necessary it was for our work in the United States and elsewhere around the world to have this kind of breaking ground, new approach.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure too, Michael, and happy to be on the show. Where do you start, eh?
Yeah, really, that's the thing,
Yeah, I think I came to this issue in the mid-'90s, and I knew nothing about it because I was not studying it, not using many drugs, and was fairly ignorant. But I ended up at a place in a neighborhood in inner city Vancouver that developed a world-class, serious drug policy disaster, which was Vancouver in the 90s, with an HIV epidemic, an overdose epidemic, open drug scenes in the street, people shooting up in wherever you can imagine, smoking crack. Everywhere, very publicly, the city was in crisis. The mayor didn't know what to do. It was a total mess. People were dying at tremendous rates of overdoses, and no one really had a grip on it. So I guess I've got involved more out of a spirit of surely to God we could do better than this, and did my own research and started to work with people in the community and found out that there was a ton of energy to try and change things, and there was actually some good research and evidence out there that we discovered in Europe that supported implementing a sort of comprehensive harm reduction approach to serious drug issues. And it just totally overshadowed the work that was going on cannabis in British Columbia. At that time, cannabis industry was booming in BC, shipping tons of cannabis to other parts of the country and to the U.S., and there was a whole other parallel sort of activist movement going on in British Columbia, certainly, and in other parts of Canada. But the downtown east side sort of crisis really crystallized a lot of thinkers and actually brought together for the first time cannabis activists with the Vancouver area network of drug users to activists who were working on party drugs. We actually we're successful in bringing all of the strands of the drug policy movement together, mostly because we wanted to develop a huge sort of a movement within the community to begin to look at new approaches to drugs. And so whereas there was some friction between, and you might be aware, you might be experienced with it in the U.S., where, in the beginning, sort of cannabis users and crack users were sort of, the good drug users and the bad drug users. It certainly was that way in Canada. There was you would never have a panel on drug policy and have a cannabis user with a crack user or a meth user on the same panel. It was very sort of balkanized, the drug using context. So we were successful, I think, in bringing together many of those strands and realizing that our drug policies are harming everyone who uses drugs, and trying to advocate very strongly for people who were severely addicted, often mentally ill, at the street level, homeless, had lots of other, bad things going on in their lives, and were being totally ignored by pretty well everyone in society, and started down the road of trying to implement some harm reduction stuff and develop a drug strategy for the city that included things like heroin prescribing for people who were addicted to heroin, and supervised injection sites so people could have a place to inject with safe, supported, supervised, and hygienic because of the HIV, Hep C sort of epidemic. And worked on that for a number of years, made some progress, but constantly ran up against the status quo sort of thinking that this problem is really, it's still a criminal problem. It's still a moral issue, and trying to you can make, I guess the experience is you can make some significant progress and then you get stuck until you've really shifted the game. And I think what we're seeing, you see in Colorado and Washington, they've shifted the game. So it's over. Cannabis prohibition is over there, right? So other places are making progress, but you get stuck and you have to keep going. And this is a long roundabout way of saying this is what we're doing with the UN stuff.
But before you get there, I would ask you just a quick kind of slow you down question. In the work that you did up there in the 4 pillars approach and all that stuff, that you just talked about, what was it that kind of, from your perspective, caught the imagination of activists around the world, the United States, the most? And what was it that caught the ire of the international bodies the most? And maybe that was the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah, no, really. We developed a drug strategy in Vancouver that had 36 recommendations to address what had been an ongoing, continuing problem for many years. And the 34 of those recommendations were fairly common sense, motherhood type things like housing, better housing for people with mental health problems, more drug treatment, those sorts of things. But 2 of them really caught the attention of the media and really galvanized our mayor into really pushing this drug strategy. One was heroin prescription, because we did have a huge heroin overdose situation going on in 93 to 2000, really. And the idea of supervised injection sites. So bringing people in from the cold. Traditionally, when people want to deal with their drug problems, the attitude would be, well, until you're ready to quit, go away, and when you're ready to quit, come back. Well, post-HIV, that was consigning people to a lot of misery. So injection sites sort of inverted that and said, come on in, just come on in and talk. And, if we get to whether you will reduce your consumption or want to quit using, we'll get to that. But the most important thing is to create safety for everybody, the community and people who use drugs. Those were the 2 things that really rocked the boat here in Vancouver, and with the right education and the right public process, we were able to convince people that these were actually good things to do. Internationally, Canada, Vancouver, and Canada got slapped on the wrists for allegedly straying outside the international drug treaties with these programs. Now, these programs were 10 years old in Switzerland and Germany and the Netherlands at the time. So they weren't new. They were just new to North America. And there was quite a vigorous reaction from the U.S. When we implemented or initiated the drug strategy.
So where is it now? I mean, this is kind of very relevant to the marijuana people that are paying attention to this stuff because, outside of the United States, what's going on inside the United States is being called a breach of the treaty. So, if you were yelled at by the rest of the world as being in breach of the treaty, what were the long-term consequences of that? Whatever happened to them?
Well, nothing. The most significant, nothing really. I mean, the International Narcotics Board and the UN have been slapping Switzerland on the wrist for years, every year, and the Swiss basically ignored them, and they carried on with their heroin prescription programs. They just carried on because they argued that it wasn't a breach of the treaties, and the UN drug control enforcement system doesn't really have much teeth. So Canada was sort of called out a few times over that, but nothing really happened. The most significant thing that happened was, which you have to take very seriously down there, is a change in government. So we were making good headway in the early 2000s. Insight was opened, the supervised injection site was opened in 2003, the heroin prescription program started in 2005. In 2006, the government changed to a conservative government, Stephen Harper's government, and that put a big chill on all of these things, and actually sort of prevented the scaling up of what was the seeds of a very successful program. So we maintained what we had, but we weren't able to move forward at a country level and see these projects initiated in Toronto and Montreal and other cities that could well use them.
Now that you have another leadership change, I think, don't you? Was that going to have a reverse impact?
Yes, I think we can get back to where we were. I think the new government does understand harm reduction. They do. They got elected on a platform that included regulating and controlling cannabis through a legal framework. So I think we're going to see some forward movement with other cities embracing some of these harm reduction initiatives, as well as a big interest in what kind of regulatory system we will have for cannabis.
Well, Donald, the main reason, I don't think you've ever been on our show before, so certainly this is overdue, bringing you on. You've been a very important player in the discussions that we've had in North America for quite a while on drug policy, and just a good thing to introduce you to our listeners and to our world. But I think specifically the work that's going on right now at the United Nations with our non-governmental organizations, the groups that we work with are called NGOs. Non-governmental organizations have gotten together in various ways in Vienna through a Vienna NGO committee, in New York through a New York NGO committee, and more recently have joined forces together with the General Assembly in New York to create, and the UN Drugs Office in Vienna, and both NGO committees to create a civil society task force. And I don't know that this civil society task force is going to have as much impact as we had back in 2008 with our whole Beyond 2008 process that we did. And we reported quite a bit on that back at the time. There's quite a few shows in the archive, interviews surrounding all those efforts. But it is a different time. And at this time, we have a lot of discussions going on inside the Americas on drug policy reform, across Europe on drug policy reform. And harm reduction seems to be the kind of language that the UN is dealing with and trying to understand, instead of demand reduction, which was, the last 10-year revisiting of the drug treaties. I think that was their big issue they were trying to understand, was demand reduction. Coming to harm reduction at the international level is a big step forward. I think our government, the U.S., is going to be pushing a health-based approach. I think that's what they're going to be, the mantra is going to be, let's move towards a health-based approach. But I think that's all keywords at this point, not much action. This civil society task force has representatives around the world that have been gathered by these rather lengthy NGO processes to try to reach out to groups inside and outside of our normal circles of communication to make sure that we had a big tent. And we've done pretty good, I think. We have a meeting coming up in February. There's going to be speakers from all over the Americas and all over the world coming in to talk to the General Assembly about what NGOs see as important issues. The issues on marijuana in the U.S. are going to come up. The issues on marijuana in Jamaica are going to come up. And we're going to be able to discuss these things with the General Assembly. That's in February. Today is actually an important day for us in drug policy, that we have this position and this place that we can give this input. And this very, very long introduction, Donald, you are the North American representative, as I understand it, for the Civil Society Task Force. I think we're going to be coming up on a break in a couple of minutes, but maybe before the break you could hopefully describe what that means in just general terms to you.
In general terms, it was a big achievement to get and civil society, the NGO community is sort of referred to as civil society with the UN, and that took some lobbying to get creation of the Civil Society Task Force. The UN drug control sort of system and architecture is not very NGO friendly. Up until 10 years ago, or even 8 years ago, these meetings they had in Vienna every year, the Commission on Narcotic Drugs really, it's almost like they were in secret. They weren't really, but there was no broadcasting, telecasting, social media, or anything like that. And over the years, the NGO community have said, hey, drug policies internationally affect us at the ground level. We're working with people at the street level. We need to be involved. And so that while we're just sort of getting in the door. We've cracked the door open, and we've got at least a half a leg in there. And this meeting coming up, I think, is a good opportunity to demonstrate that civil society in the NGO world has an awful lot to offer in terms of meaningful engagement and meaningful recommendations for addressing drug issues around the world. I don't know if do you want a commercial or?
Yeah, I think this might be a good time for a break. What do you think, Casper?
Anytime is the right time to take a break and enjoy Time for Hemp. I can certainly tell you that, and let our friends know that we are not just a 1-hour broadcast, but we are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we have a large group of people who are dedicated to ending prohibition, and we ask that you share us with your friends. Listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
Serious Seeds is your source for quality cannabis and sativa seeds. Serious Seeds are the creators of legendary strains like AK-47, Bubblegum, Chronic, Cali Mist, and White Russian. The AK-47 is probably the most awarded strain on the planet. The high THC content of AK-47 makes it the perfect medical strain for patients seeking quick pain relief. Cali Mist is an almost pure sativa. Female medical cannabis patients have reported that this strain helps relieve menstrual cramps. Serious Seeds just acquired another Dutch high-quality seed bank, Magus Genetics. From now on, Serious Seeds can offer you even more award-winning strains. The fine folks at Serious Seeds strive to breed the best cannabis genetics that they can find, so patients can rely on the effectiveness of their medicine. Go to SeriousSeeds.com to grow your medicine. That site again is SeriousSeeds.com.
We got some jokey leaders in a jokey town. A three-ring circus, what a bunch of clowns. They're joking and they jiving and they messing around. We got some jokey leaders, what a bunch of clowns. Hey! What? Come on! Oh yeah! Watch this! The House of Parliament must see a jokey place.
I got to agree. We do have some jokey leaders all around the world, and they are just a bunch of clowns. Have you seen what the Republicans and the Democrats have offered up this time around for a selection of a leader? Corporate Clinton or corporate Bush or some kind of guy by the name of Trump? Seriously? And Bernie Sanders seems like a good choice. He's far back in the back, and no one's ever heard of anybody else that seems to make any sense or have a good brain or qualifications to be in office. Those people are too smart to go out and campaign and try to get elected. Well, it's too bad. We could use the brains in the seats of our leadership. But the way the corporations are and the lobbyists are all around the world, that's just not going to happen. With that said, I'm going to pass this joint chat back to my joint host and our joint guest. Don't forget, anytime you hear the word joint on the Big Joint broadcast, nearly 2.5 million people all around the world pack their bongs, their pipes, their vaporizers, or twist up a joint and take time for hemp. Michael?
Thank you, Casper. You know, at least the broadcasting networks are enjoying the ratings boost that they're getting from all this fun Trump stuff that they're getting to view.
That's true.
You know, we're talking about some serious stuff here. And, you know, this civil society task force, I want people to understand that this is, as meager an effort as it may be, you know, you have 190 countries that are working on these drug control treaties together. They've selected 53 of them to work on this Committee on Narcotic Drugs. And then the rest are all in the General Assembly there in New York and not really working on drug policy every day. And then the NGO community, which covers the entire globe and covers a whole spectrum of issues from, you know, ketamine issues and medical cannabis issues and on to war, you know, opium in Afghanistan and stuff like that. So these are complicated drugs issues. And we have thousands and thousands of NGOs around the globe. How do you coordinate them? How do you organize them into a palatable fashion for these 190 countries to then consume this information? And I think this is our effort, the Civil Society Task Force. It's you said there are 2 representatives for North America, so we'll get into that in a second. But Donald, if you could just describe the overall task force, like there's like 20 different areas of interest, aren't there? Something like that?
Yes, the overall task force that's been working for about a year now is comprised of about 31 people from around the world. So some of them have regional representation. So there's 2 from Australia, 2 from Central and North America, 2 from Eastern Europe and Central Asia, and Latin America, Africa, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, Western Europe. Those sorts of regions that the UN sort of works with. And then there are some memberships from affected populations, such as farmers. Farmers who are growing coca, cannabis, and other plant-based plants that drugs are derived from. Palliative care, essential medicines. That community where there's a huge issue around getting access to pain medication in developing countries, partly because of the drug control treaties and the over restriction on medications, or the fear of being seen as being not controlling drugs appropriately. The recovery community is represented. Families are represented. Drug users have a seat at the table. Youth, and then there's the prevention community, the harm reduction community, the criminal justice community. People and NGOs working with people within the criminal justice system for drug-related offenses and trying to figure out better ways to deal with those problems. So it's a very diverse group of people representing a very diverse bunch of regions and interests. So it's really an attempt to cast the net as wide as possible to get the kinds of input that would really be important for government leaders, member states, as they call them at the UN, to hear their points of view.
Yes, indeed. I think that the opportunity for the public is to what? Would you suggest reaching out through organizations, or would you suggest reaching out directly to individuals that you can access the list through the NGO committees, websites, and the UNODC, the UN Office of Drug Control and Crime Prevention websites? You can actually access the list of all these representatives. How do you recommend the public interact with it?
Well, I think it's set up. First of all, there's very little funding for organizations who are like ours, who have one of these seats on the committee. So we're really tapping our networks and reaching out beyond them where we can. And I think the structure is for the people sitting on the civil society task force to reach out to other organizations doing work in the area of drug policy very broadly. It could be prevention or recovery or John Howard Society type work with criminal justice system, or advocacy organizations, reform organizations. So I really set up sort of NGO to NGO. I don't think there's a capacity for. I think if the public want to reach out, then they need to speak to an organization in their community who's working on the drugs issue and say, look, you need to be involved in this UN process, and you need to get in touch with the civil society task force, and then that way have their input.
And towards that end, I think the lists of membership for the New York NGO Committee and the Vienna NGO Committee are also online. And certainly in the United States, it's not hard to find an organization that's working very closely with this process. The Drug Policy Alliance is working very closely with this process, as is the Students for Sensible Drug Policy and Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Tell us just briefly about your organization and the work that you're doing up there.
I'm the director of the Canadian Drug Policy Coalition, which is a coalition of about 60 organizations across Canada involved in some way in responding to issues of drugs at the community level or the provincial level or at the national level. Some of our organizations are advocacy organizations advocating for reform of our drug laws in Canada. Others are frontline service organizations like your local syringe exchange organization, who are busy at the front end of all of this, but also want to be involved in the policy discussions about the need for change, because bad policies create more work for them in terms of trying to deal with preventing overdose deaths, preventing HIV, getting syringes out there into the community. You mentioned earlier that the mantra in the U.S. now is, we're not going to use the war on drugs anymore. We're going to take a public health approach. It's a health thing. It's a health issue, and you hear the word health a lot. And that's good. That's movement, but it is just words now, and it really is not. If you're using the word health and not talking about decriminalization and regulation, then you're looking at a flawed health approach. The Organization of American States report. This is all the Latin American. This is all the countries of the Americas. There was a report recently in 2012 released that really said quite clearly that if you want to implement a health approach, a public health approach, decriminalization of all drugs needs to be at the core of it, because otherwise you're working against yourself. You cannot say this is a health issue and then turn around and treat someone like a criminal, someone you're trying to actually help. So I think we need to, and that's happening at the UN, that discussion, because health is ascendant in terms of a concept as a response to drugs. but we don't really know what people mean by it. Some people think it's drug courts, which are not really a health approach. They're a criminal justice approach with a health component. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask you, probably for after break, but I want to ask you a question to think about. As we're approaching this kind of health-based approach, certainly decriminalization is something that could be done now. It's been done by Netherlands for many years. It's a very accepted kind of way of handling cannabis, but it's not perfect by any means. And a regulatory schema for non-medical access, it seems like there's a line there that we may be crossing. The United States is arguing that there is the flexibility in the treaty to allow for these things to happen, and the International Narcotics Control Board is saying there isn't. So I just wonder, what we're in for. But I think I'm going to hand it off to Casper, and we'll take that up after the break.
And I want to remind people that we are growing on our site live, so make it a point to tune in there and check out our garden. It's always fun to see plants becoming buds and buds becoming smoke here on Time for Hemp.
You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. The only broadcasting network dedicated to ending the global war on drugs on iHeartRadio.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
Well, I once had a bowl, good green reefer, a big fat don't be much, much sweeter. Mighty don't hide it. Mighty don't hide it. Well, mighty don't hide it. Mighty don't hide it. Well, mighty don't hide it. Fire up right now.
Yeah, fire up right now. Be loud, be proud. Let everybody know that you are a cannabis user, whether it be for social reasons or for medicinal purposes. What's important is you are a user, and to hide behind closed doors and to peek out windows and to be terrified to even say the word like you clowns in Indiana. Jesus criminy, I tell you, stand in line at a grocery store in Indiana and say the word marijuana and people look at you like you just said something awful. Damn. Anyway, get your head out of your tuchus and realize it's a plant. It's not going to kill you. It can't pull a gun on you. It can't pull a knife on you. It's not like poison oak. If you run into it, it's not going to make you itch. It's not like some kind of poison ivy or something that you eat. It's going to kill you. Good golly, Miss Molly. It is grand for you to consume, as a matter of fact. Even makes you a better person, whether you're smoking it or eating it. Bunch of ninnies. Anyway. With that said, I'm going to get off my soapbox and pass this joint chat back to my joint host so he can get into his joint topics with our joint guest here at Time for Hemp.
Thanks, Casper. It strikes me that when I first started working on medical marijuana stuff and medicinal access stuff at the UN, the state of the art then was at the time. The UN had put air quotes on medical marijuana and had suggested, this couldn't possibly be okay. But now we all know, and the world and the UN has accepted medical cannabis, and in fact, country after country is setting up international cannabis medicinal bureaus to deal with the paperwork at the UN. And Germany, I think, just recently passed theirs. Country after country have cannabis medicinal bureaus and have cannabis medicinal programs. Some better, some worse. I think the Canadian program is probably one of the better ones. But now, we're at another crossroads where, countries like Uruguay and others are talking about regulating cannabis at the national level to gut the cartels, to take the profit away from the cartels and to take away the crime and the violence that's so inherent to that relationship. And I think it's a very great arguments that they put forward about, human rights obligations trumping these drug control obligations, and about the need for the treaty to be fit to purpose. And that, if they're doing what they're doing for safety of their people and the treaty is in the way, then we need to scratch our heads as to why that would ever occur. And I think all these arguments are very good, but are we heading for a showdown? I mean, what's your point of view? You have a great insight into this stuff.
Well, I've been more interested in it than ever because of Canada's federal government's position that the new Justin Trudeau was elected on a platform to regulate cannabis. So suddenly Canada is in the spotlight. And I was just thinking there wasn't a showdown when Uruguay implemented regulation of cannabis last year. But I think that's partly because the U.S. was actually the first to implement cannabis regulation in 2012, or the vote was in 2012 and it was implemented in 2013. So that took away. The U.S. historically has been the sort of, cop of the world on drug policy, and they would have had some pretty harsh words for Uruguay had Colorado and Washington, had the citizens of Colorado and Washington not sort of taken that stick away from them. So now Canada is moving out into the light. I think my guess, Michael, is that I don't think there is going to be a showdown. I think that it's going to become patently obvious, especially if another 2 or 3 U.S. states regulate cannabis, if Canada moves in that direction. Other Latin American countries may be considering it, or European countries. I think what's going to, I think and I hope what's going to be patently obvious is that the cannabis laws are bad laws, and there needs to be an international agreement to revisit the issue of cannabis. I don't think you're going to get into a prolonged pissing match between hardline governments like China and Russia on this issue. I don't think it's going to be pretty necessarily. There'll be some nasty things said, but I think the cannabis has left the barn. The horse is out of the barn, as they say. I may be wrong. I mean, you guys, if you elect a different president, if you elect a Republican president, that may shift back. Even though lots of Republicans support cannabis regulation, we all know it's a very political issue. So Canada has to figure out how they're going to deal with it internationally, whether they're going to call the treaties out. I personally think, and based on my conversations with legal people, that the U.S. is in breach of the conventions. I think Uruguay probably is too, and I think that's fine. I think that it's not about going back to where they were. It's about dealing with the problem. Countries are finding it necessary to breach the conventions just to develop good policy. And that's the real problem. And that's a problem for the UN, and they need to strike a committee or a working group over the next couple of years to actually look at that issue and get out of the mess they've sort of created by not allowing countries to move in the right direction with cannabis. So I'm hoping Canada will will just say it outright. Yes, we are going to create a regulated market for cannabis. We know that's in breach of the treaty, but it is consistent with our constitutional framework in Canada, and that's just something we need to do. And yes, it's a problem, but let's address the problem as adults in the room.
You know, it would be really great and very hopeful if we could have some sort of task force that would happen, you know, in the next few years on this and sort this out. I've heard of at least one suggestion where such a task force would look at flexibility, you know, itself and determine, you know, what the member states think flexibility really means and what it would really extend to. I don't know. It's like very, very nuanced conversation to me, I think.
I think the biggest outcome, the best outcome that could come out of this big UN meeting coming up in April is that there is an agreement that the conventions do need to be reformed. It can't be done in one meeting in New York in April. It's too big and complex and contentious. The best outcome could be an agreement to strike a time-limited task force to come up with recommendations on how to address the challenges such as cannabis regulation in various jurisdictions and other challenges that the UN cannot get consensus on, because it's a consensus-based body, and there are just things where there will be no consensus, and they need to recognize that and not let that stop countries from going forward with certain initiatives.
You know, if you look at the great speech that President Morales gave when he was working on coca issues for his country, and successfully so, seceded from the treaty and reapplied with reservations so that his people would be able to legally use the coca products and market and commerce in the coca products. Quite a saga. And you know, the one speech that I'm talking about where he pulled coca out of his pocket, it was a world news event. It was a protest. It was an illegal act. You know, this president pulling coca out of his pocket at the UN and talking about it. And the speech that he gave about how this is an important plant to his people, and it was a mistake of history to sign into these treaties without allowing for this continued use that was uninterrupted for so long and produced no harm, and it was a medicine and a food and a commerce and you know, gosh, I'm thinking what he's saying applies to so many plant-based things that the treaty system itself seemed to be disrespectful of plants, of traditional use, of indigenous cultures. I mean, are we going to have to wait for a very long time for that kind of aspect of the treaty to be finally rooted out? Or are they just going to keep dealing with these like symptoms, which I consider, and I guess I'm asking, do you agree with that premise too? You know, but I think these are all symptoms of that premise, that false premise that the plants don't really provide any usefulness to us, that it's patent medicines that are real value, and they're all scheduled, and you know, they're all through the WHO process, and cannabis is an outlier.
Yes, I think cannabis is an outlier, and a bunch of other plant-based substances that indigenous people have been using around the world for many years, like coca. So, you know, I think a task force could try and look at that issue, building on the Bolivia situation, and look at other substances like peyote and ayahuasca, those sorts of substances that get caught up in this international drug treaties for no real good reason. So I agree that it is a symptom, and we really do need to start to deconstruct what the treaties actually, where the treaties are beneficial and where the treaties hold countries back from doing what's best for their citizens.
Now, you know that I've been working with the issues of medical cannabis and going back and forth to Geneva for the World Health Organization meetings and trying to sort out, you know, what exactly is going on with that. The World Health Organization holds kind of the purse strings of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs on what schedule numbers should be applied to drugs. The CND can't make a schedule change without a recommendation as the guidelines or framework of their decision. They can either make the decision or not make the decision, but they can't come up with their own guidelines. And that WHO process, it seems to be not paid attention to by a lot of people. If the World Health Organization were to really get into this and do their job and put cannabis on the table for a critical review and a rescheduling process, wouldn't that have some real impact on this whole discussion we're talking about?
I think it would be a very welcome step, and something they given the evidence, the growing evidence around medical cannabis, they should be doing that. They should be anticipating that there's going to be some discussion about this and move forward.
Well, we're hopeful that the future brings better results than the past, because we haven't really seen that much out of the World Health Organization yet. They've done more on ketamine, and even that they've fallen short of that kind of critical review process that would really get us to where we need to be in this discussion. It's a shame. I guess at this point in the show, we're winding down here. Believe it or not, we've already used up a whole hour of your time talking about this stuff. It's been very, very enjoyable to me. It's gone by like in 30 seconds to me. I want to ask you, kind of about the future for your organization, for what's going on there. What do you see for the Civil Society Task Force coming from this action that you're doing?
I think we're actually at the early days of civil society engagement with the UN, and I look forward to an increased focus on civil society in the coming years. There's another important meeting coming up in 2019 to look at a new political declaration for the next 10 years, 2019 to 2029. And I think that this next 3 years is actually a critical time period for everyone to be involved. The meeting in April we see as a beginning of the change in global drug policy. And I encourage everyone to find out more about how they can be involved, what organizations are in their communities that they can hook up with, and urge for them to get involved. And we could build this movement over the next 3 years towards 2019.
What kind of website domain URLs can you throw out to people?
Drugpolicy.ca is our organization. If you want to check in and see what we do up here in Canada, and be happy to correspond with anyone who writes us.
And I think I would suggest people to Google everything else. New York NGO Committee on Drugs, Vienna NGO Committee on Drugs. Those words will get you into those things. And UNODC, UN Office on Drug Control and Crime Prevention. UNGAS, UNGASS, United Nations General Assembly Special Session. At this point, if you just type in those words, those letters, it'll bring you right to a dedicated website that the UN has set up for the timeline to this whole thing. And it's really quite exciting. And I think that whether change happens in 2016, 2019, it seems change is underfoot, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
What do you think, Casper?
Jeepers. I think it's great, Wally.
What's that word? Come on. It's fabulous. No.
It's groovy, baby.
There you go. I get $1 for every time he says groovy. No, just kidding.
I keep trying to bring the word groovy back.
I'm the groovy fan club.
Thank you. Well, it has been a great show, and I want to remind people that we are doing programming here around the clock, 24/7. You can tune in and listen. We've also got archives you can find at timeforhemp.com. If you like this show, we got all the past shows up there, and we have other great hosts on the network like Judge James Gray and Mark Emery, and Skunk Magazine does a show on the network, and Andrea Herman. There's a lot of groovy cats that are putting together original content for the expression of letting you know how important it is to end prohibition, and I would encourage you to share us with your friends. Oh, yeah, and don't forget, the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spend. Take another look and spend some time for hemp. Don't cut trees for paper, 'cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes.
Free? Did you say free? Free hemp? free hemp? Free hemp video and audio? Free downloads of all the top artists, all the pot artists on planet Earth. Interviews with all the people making the movement, making the hemp movement. It's time for hemp. That's right, world. It's time for hemp. That's right, world. It's time for hemp.